Speaker is Minister of Education Kelvin Goertzen. He is a Minister of Education in Manitoba, Canada. He is the Government House Leader, a graduate of the University of Manitoba. He has degrees in economics, commerce, and law. And Minister Goertzen, if you want to go ahead and come on, the floor is yours. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good morning. Well, it's good morning in Manitoba. I'm not sure where the time will be in all the various places that participants are in around the world, but it is a pleasure to join you. I'm in Steinbach, Manitoba. That is the center of Canada, if you can picture Canada in your mind. I would be about 2 hours from Grand Forks, North Dakota, which we visit often on the weekend with my family. And of course, we can't visit it now because the international borders are closed. But in terms of proximity, that's where we are located. So as Minister of Education in Manitoba, I was previously the Minister of Health, and so I have something of a unique perspective on the pandemic, both from the education side and from the health side. Canada, in dealing with COVID-19, the coronavirus, is not entirely equal, and just as it is in other areas, there are some provinces that are hit more specifically and have more impact because of the coronavirus, which of course has impacted their schools as well. But every school across Canada did close down early in March, and all of those schools and students were of course then displaced. Now, some of the schools are opening up at this point. In British Columbia, they're back on a limited basis with in-class learning. In some parts of rural Quebec, that is happening. In some parts of the Maritimes, the teachers are back within the schools. And starting on Monday of next week in Manitoba, in the area that I live in, we are going to have limited in-class activities. So teachers will be going back, having one-on-one assessments with students and some small groups as well. And so we are far from normal, but we are moving back a little bit towards what normality may look like, particularly in the fall. So as the Minister of Education, I hear a lot from parents. I get lots of questions, concerns, letters, different sorts of interaction in terms of how this homeschooling, crisis schooling, experience has gone for them. And I hear many, many different things. And of course, I'm a parent myself. I'm a parent of an 8-year-old. So I'm experiencing that not just from a government perspective, but also from a parental perspective as well. So some parents have indicated to me that having their kids at home and doing their best that they can in terms of providing instruction and coordination with teachers who are working remotely and sending stuff home to students has gone well. I've heard stories that there are many students who are more focused than they have been when they're traditionally in the classroom, whose grades are improving, whose overall mental health is improving, and who are really connecting in a different way with their family. That is on the most positive side of the spectrum, and I'm happy to say that my family would probably fit into that more positive side of the spectrum. Of course, I hear a lot of other things as well. That it has not gone well, that some parents are struggling tremendously, that some students are struggling as well. And I try to remind those who are involved on both sides that this was not planned. This isn't homeschooling in the traditional way, where you prepare for the year coming up, where you prepare yourself as a parent or a guardian, and you prepare your kids for that year. This is something that wasn't expected and that nobody had really planned for. And so to try to separate out some of that, to remember that all of those good social aspects that are happening in terms of reconnecting with your kids maybe in a way that you hadn't before, those are all positives that do exist within the homeschooling traditional environment, and that should be remembered. The challenges that you might be experiencing when it comes to helping your student with the education curriculum itself isn't really a normal homeschooling experience now, because you didn't have time to prepare. And so to try to hold some of this experience loosely and to then consider how it could impact your decisions in the future, whether that is looking at homeschooling or just simply doing schooling in a different way, and maybe just being more engaged in the lives of your students, which would be a good thing, because certainly I have seen, both as a parent and as Minister of Education, that there has been a movement within, certainly within Canada, and I'm sure it's true in many places in the world, to simply give over that education to the state, to government. And that, of course, is part of choice. And I'm a big believer in choice when it comes to education. But regardless if students are homeschooling or in the public school system, that parental engagement is very, very important. And even if it doesn't change numbers in terms of homeschooling, and I know a lot of your presenters said that it certainly would, it hopefully will change that parental engagement and that recognition that education isn't simply a state activity. Maybe should even be primarily a state activity. I mean, much of that education, maybe most of that education for a lot of things, should be considered in the home as well. So parental engagement, I think, is something that's going to be very important coming out of this when we're on the other side of this pandemic. Research in Manitoba shows that homeschooling is successful, where you have, of course, a willing student, a willing child, and an engaged parent. It's also more successful when you have other homeschoolers around you, so when there's a community of homeschoolers who can interact together. That success grows when there is some support from government. So whether that's allowing homeschooling families to access the gyms within the public school system or the libraries, to give them that support and that resource that they might not otherwise be able to access. So in agreeing with the professor who spoke well on this issue a few minutes ago and in his presentation, I think this will change the dynamic for homeschooling, both from a perception perspective, because there's going to be a lot of parents who may have a different sort of understanding of what it's like to have your child at home more often, and hopefully a positive experience, particularly on the social side. But there'll be a need, I think, to grow more resources for those who are homeschooling, or for those who simply want to be more engaged with their students at home, even if they are in the public school system. And I do think that we're going to see more activity on resources online, the ability to have more curriculum online, and ultimately have more students engaged in that way online. And that's a good thing, because that offers more and more choice to students and to parents. I would conclude my time by saying something I said on a previous presentation. Homeschooling and homeschoolers often talk a lot about rights, and that's important. Our government in Manitoba has been very clear in saying that we support the right of parents to have choice within education, whether that's independent schools or whether that's homeschooling, or of course the public school system. That choice, those rights, need to be exercised and need to be protected. But ministers of education don't spend a lot of time talking about rights. We don't, as we get together as ministers across Canada, like we do frequently, either online in this version or personally when we can do that, we don't talk a lot about rights in education. We talk about results. Ministers of education, our language is about results. We get queried by the media based on the results of students. How are your students doing in international or local tests? What are the results? And I would say to homeschoolers and homeschooling families, you have a great story to tell. There are lots of really good results, and we've heard about some of those from Senator Cruz and others on this webinar, that the results are there. And don't just talk about rights, because rights often follow results in a lot of different things. And if we can prove the results of homeschooling and independent schooling and other schooling, it'll continue, I think, to show that we need to have more of those options, more of those rights. And rather than results following rights, I think that results can lead rights in a lot of different places. So thank you for all the different panelists who've been involved here this morning. I've appreciated hearing from you. I learn from you. I learn every time Mike sets one of these up, and I'm grateful for that opportunity to learn from those around the world. Bless each of you as you're going through your issue with coronavirus and COVID-19, and I hope that you and your families remain safe and that your countries do well in this time.